Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine War Update Extra video where I give you the contextual tidbits and extra understanding to broaden your information base and understanding of the conflict as a whole in Ukraine. However, it's worth mentioning now because it's literally happening right now that and I'd normally do this in my frontline updates earlier in the day, but there is this saturation missile attack happening in Ukraine. So the Russians have released, it looks like, about 50 missiles. Now, I talk about this very often, which is that they don't do this on consecutive days because it looks like they need to build up their capacity of rockets again, or missiles from that I'm sure they're pulling from all ends of the world, and different bases and different ships and whatnot. So they'll be they've got only a certain amount of cruise missiles and the kind of missiles they need to do the damage that they hope to do in their saturation attacks on the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. And as I keep saying, they don't just have these in one centralized warehouse full of cruise missiles and then dole them out whenever they're needed. They'll be in different air bases and different locations around the globe, and in different and around Russia, and in different ships and submarines. And there are only a certain amount of ships and submarines in the Black Sea because of the Montreux Agreement, which means that that Turkey can shut the Bosphorus Straits down at the bottom of the Black Sea. So just to show you, down here, there's a tiny access to the Black Sea. You have to come through here, through the sort of Aegean Sea, up past Greece, and through the tiny, tiny straits here, right? And Turkey own that bit of water. So the Black Sea isn't just this sea that you can easily access. It's tightly controlled, and the agreement is that in the event of a war, Turkey can shut those straits down, and they did this at the beginning of the conflict. And I maintain that that is one of the most important things that has dictated the outcome of this conflict, because if Russia had been able to get their entire naval fleet into the Black Sea, they could have absolutely hammered Odessa, Mykolaiv, and really all of Ukraine with all the missile capability that those ships had at the time. And I think the war would have been very different. However, they couldn't do that, and they were left with only the amount of ships that they had. Now, those ships had a certain amount of, and submarines had a certain amount of cruise missiles. Otherwise, they're having to go to other bases around here. So the Engels Air Base in the Saratov region, just around there. You've got another air base in Ryazan. Now, interestingly, this morning, these two bases were hit. And these were hit by Ukrainians. So I reported on this in my frontline update this morning. Now, what this shows is that the Ukrainians, I think, had intelligence that the attack was going to take place today. And they were, or at least if not today, then very, very soon. So they hit these bases to try and delay that. But it happened anyway, and there was some advance warning. In fact, when I was recording my frontline update video this morning, I didn't report this, but there were rumors already that some of the planes had taken off. And so it looked like today might be the day, or today is the day. And so now over 50 missiles have been fired into Ukraine. The news is, and by the time you watch this might already have been and gone and be old news, or at least news from earlier today. But there's all sorts of stuff going on. So Zaporizhia, Kiev, there's all sorts of activities. Odessa, as you can see here, there's been an arrival. Now, sometimes you wonder whether that is a missile that has hit its target, or whether it's a surface-to-air missile that's taken out the missile, and whatever is left lands, because that can still cause damage. It's hard to know so early. There are certain areas that are without electricity, so Kryvyi Rih is without electricity, boiler and pumping stations are shut down, Cruise missiles are being shut down. The air defenses are working overtime at the moment. Um, and Moldova is having electricity problems, and the Sumy Oblast has seen a power cut. So loads of places are losing power, but some of that might be due to emergency conditions being put into place. Um, Multiple waves of missiles are likely in today's attacks. Uh, and The idea is that this wave could be trying to overwhelm the Ukrainian air defenses in order that another wave can then be released that will then have a far greater chance of successfully finding their targets. These are these kind of saturation attacks. But going back to this idea that they just don't have all the missiles in place. Like if they did these on successive days, right, Ukraine would be crippled. I don't think they're purposefully delaying the attacks to leave a week between these kinds of saturation missile attacks. I don't for a minute think that's the case, because they would do far more damage if they could do these on successive days or just continually, because you overwhelm the air defenses, and then each successive wave will have a greater proportion of missiles that get through to their intended targets. And whereas if you leave it a week, you have time for the Ukrainians to prepare to get more surface-to-air missile units and rockets, and to replenish their reserves, and they will take out more missiles. So yeah, so that's what's going on at the moment. It is all happening right now, and Russia are doing as much damage as they can. And the Ukrainian air forces are up and in the skies, particularly over and around Kiev, trying to shoot down the so there's Kiev, trying to shoot down the cruise missiles, as well as relying on surface-to-air missiles. Uh, Now let's go on to my usual sort of stuff I had prepared. Like that was just me reacting to the news that's happening right now. And speaking of air defense or air offense, here are some. It's just nothing other than some quite nice footage of Ukrainian jets doing their thing, flying in the sky in tandem on some kind of mission. Who knows what the mission is, but there you go. So I just think that's quite nice footage. Right, let's talk a little bit about Ukraine, Baltics, and the Baltics rebuke Macron, so Emmanuel Macron, the French president, for suggesting security guarantees for Russia. So this is when I think yesterday maybe the French President Emmanuel Macron suggested that the West should consider Russia's need for security guarantees if Moscow agrees to talks to end the war in Ukraine. But this has unleashed a storm of criticism, as it says here, in Kyiv and the Baltic states. Now, the scenario is this, and you get this in criminal cases, don't you? Say like, all right, I'm part of the mafia. I'm going to report on what the mafia has done, but I want immunity. I don't want to be prosecuted. If I agree to, give you this information on these mafia guys, then I'm not going to go to prison. In the same sort of way, Emmanuel Macron, I think, is suggesting here that if Russia are going to agree to come to the table to talks to end this war, we might have to concede to them certain guarantees for their security. For example, it might be that we're not going to take them to trial for war crimes or something like that. I don't know. This is me doing a lot of speculation. But of course, that's highly, highly controversial, because although you might want to try and bribe them to come to the table to do talks because you think the talks are the most important thing, those concessions might be just wholly unacceptable to people like the Ukrainians. And indeed, here, the Baltic states are stepping up as well. So in an interview with French TV station TF1, Macron said that Europe needs to prepare its future security architecture and also think how to give guarantees to Russia the day it returns to the negotiating table. So Zelensky's top aide, Podolyak, said that it is the world that needs security guarantees from Russia, not the other way round. Civilized world needs security guarantees from barbaric intentions of post-Putin Russia. Podolyak said on Twitter on Sunday. So Alexei Danilov, the Secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, said a, quote, denuclearize and demilitarize Russia would be the best guarantee of peace, not only for Ukraine, but also for the world. Someone wants to provide security guarantees to a terrorist and killer state, Danilov wrote on Twitter, instead of Nuremberg to sign an agreement with Russia and shake hands. So this has obviously, annoyed a lot of people, as I say, including the Baltic states, because they aren't prepared to concede security guarantees to Russia, who are obviously and overtly the aggressors in this whole conflict. And it just seems properly wrong. And it's the same idea that yeah, we should do diplomacy, but diplomacy happens once Ukraine has placed themselves in the position of power in terms of what's going on the battlefield, what's going on the fronts. Ukraine need to win the war for diplomacy to work effectively in favor of Ukraine, which is in favor of the people who are in the moral right here. So that's what's going on. Okay, let's move completely to a different sort of area here. This is a whole bunch of Tor. What are they? Tor air defense systems being and other equipment being noticed in Belarus, which is interesting. There's a lot of these systems being shipped somewhere for some reason. What might that be? Whenever I see stuff like this, I just think, oh, just hit that train. Hit that train with some rockets. Job done. Here is an interesting bit of footage from a T-80BV main battle tank the Ukrainians use, and you've got the gunner operating a COTS, commercial off-the-shelf drone here, which I think is quite interesting. So the tanks themselves operate drones to help them, be their eyes. Rather than, I always assumed that the drones would be some other bunch of people somewhere else who are then communicating to the tank. But here you've got the tank gunner operating the drone so that he can see, what he needs to hear or where the threats are. And then, stuff happens after that, and they get to fire at whatever it is that the gunner or the operator can find with his drone. So there you go. I just think that's interesting that the tank crew control their own drones. And pretty cool footage. I love the sun in that as well. Bit of machine gun footage. I don't know if that's just for show, but they're firing at something or nothing. Okay, let's move on to the next thing, which is Ukro Boronprom, who are a Ukrainian military manufacturing company, reported that it now moves to the final stage of tests of the Ukrainian attack drone with a warhead of 75 kilograms and a flight range of up to 1,000 kilometers. Wow, this is going to make a really big difference, I think, to the Ukrainians if they can use something like this. And when you start understanding that today, as I told you, there were hits on a Moscow airbase in Ryazan, at Ryazan, and also in the Saratov province, then the question is, well, what's hit them? Is that sabotage, or is that some kind of drone that's got all the way over to there without being identified? And could it be that moving to the final stage of tests is actually testing it on the opposition? I don't know, but the ability for Ukraine to be able to use something like this in a way that Russia is using similar sort of warheads and drones like the Shahed 136. This could be a game changer. I don't want to keep using the term game changer, but if they can produce these with enough, in enough capacity, then these could be incredibly useful for taking out Russian targets as the Russians move their logistics back and back. So I told you earlier today that the Russians have asked in the Bakhmut area, particularly. So let's go to Bakhmut to move their ammunition depots back 100 kilometers from the front line. Well, 100 kilometers is all the way back to, Luhansk. Wow. So that's almost having depots back in Russian um, territory, and and I'm sure they've got plenty of depots there now. If Ukraine can suddenly take out some of these depots in Russian land, Russian territory, then that is interesting. That is a change. And in the same vein, production of 122, 152, 155 shells from Ukro Boronprom. So this is the manufacture of Soviet era shells that they are basically running out of. Um, so there are certain munitions companies in Eastern Europe who are producing these. I know that NATO and the West have been trying to collect, ammunition from all around the world. There are plenty of countries that have Soviet era, you know, ordnance on their books as well as artillery, and they've been doing the best to get Ukraine some of that. But at some point, you need to make these things, and no one seems to make them anymore outside of Russia. So Ukraine are now stepping up. Now the question is, how many of these can they make, and how quickly? I don't know of the details there, but they are making them, and that's really good news the for the Ukrainian artillery units who are still needing these desperately. Fantastic. And talking about, collections of ammunition and ordnance, here is some drone footage of, I mean, this must be so. The drone operator here must just think it's all his Christmases at once, thinking, here's just a massive load of explosive material. Let's see what damage I can do by dropping some IEDs on top of it. And there you go. And that, this will all be used against the Ukrainians if it's not destroyed. So, but it's also interesting to see how poorly maintained this all is and stored. I mean, it's literally littered around on the wet floor, on the wet ground. It's just insane. Anyway, big bangs there. And just finally, is our final one fireworks night, or is that the end? So you can imagine, the drone going back after it's used up its IDs, which it seems to have done there. There's still more damage to be done, lots more boxes to blow up, so they'll probably be going back, picking up some more stuff and returning. So that's what I have for you today. I have actually got another video which is like a philosophy to do with strategy. So I've recorded a little video about how I think, talking about offensive attacks from the Ukrainians, whether they should go down here, whether attacking here actually opens up a much larger front line, reacting to a YouTube comment. So I've done that, and then I was thinking last night, because as I try and get to sleep, of course I'm thinking about the Ukraine war. But I was thinking about philosophy and thinking about goal-orientated morality, and how morality doesn't make any sense unless you've got kind of a goal in mind. Like, saying you should do something and you ought to do something only makes sense in terms of a goal. Like, if I want this, then I should do that. And I can bore you with some conditional sentences and grammar and philosophy to do with that, and I will do that, which lays up the idea there's no point talking about where the Ukrainians should attack unless you have a really clearly defined goal, which the Ukrainians will have. It's very difficult for us armchair generals to sit down and go, well, Ukraine should attack here, because the should is defined by the goal, and unless we know exactly what their goal is, of course their long-term goal is, we want all our territory back, yeah, but they'll break that down into much more discrete packages of goals and objectives. And the idea is going to be, like, we want to take these cities, right? Okay, if that's our goal, then what do we need to do? Like, we want to take out logistics. Okay, if that's our goal, what do we need to do? So it might be that if their goal at the moment is about logistics, then actually liberating all of this territory in Luhansk is not important. It is not their prime goal. So therefore, their goals will dictate exactly what their moves are and what they do. And so, anyway, I've half told you what I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to talk about that in more depth in another video. So watch out, they may come out today, or maybe tomorrow. Anyway, thanks so much for your support. Please like, subscribe, share. Please, if you want to support the channel, there's all the ways in the description, but you can go to uasupporter.com/ATP, and anything you grab from here to show your support for Ukraine will give my channel a little bit of commission, so it would be really appreciated. Here are some jackets you can get for men to show that support, but there's plenty of stuff, and there's a collaboration between myself and reporting from Ukraine in that respect. So any help is always gratefully received. Thanks so much, take care, and I will speak to you later.